So my name is Johanny Cepeda-Freytiz. I'm originally from New York City. I'm the proud daughter, I need to emphasize, of Dominican parents who came into the United States from the Dominican Republic, obviously, in pursuit of the American dream. And the city of Reading helped them realize that American dream, of home ownership, just being more financially free and independent to some extent, because the cost of living here in the city of Reading compared to New York City is it's much more affordable, and home ownership is much more attainable. And so I need to give credit to my parents for introducing me to the city of Reading. And I want to say that from my mom, I got what my mother or my parents instilled in me. From my mom, I got that knowledge is power. So making sure that I'm constantly educating and building my mind, because that's something that nobody can take away. From my dad, I got when there's a will, there's a way. Querer es poder. He would always drill that into me. So don't ever think you can't. If you have the willpower, you can make it happen. It all starts with your mindset. And he also instilled in me that everything that you do in life, you do it with love or you don't do it at all. So I got to give props to them, because obviously they shaped the person that I've become today. I have two children, which are Neith and Elias. And Neith is 20 years old. She attends George Washington University on her third year. My son, Elias Monroe, actually goes to RAC. Oh, well, let me tell you a little bit about what I did in New York before I came here and had my kids. So I used to work for an agency called Grand Street Settlement, a nonprofit serving the Lower East Side of Manhattan community and beyond. And I used to manage what's called a Beacon Center, which is a community-based center housed inside a school building. Because in New York City, the Department of Education is overseen by the mayor, right? And so all school buildings, our Beacon Center, were funded by the Department of Youth and Community Development. So all these programs are strategically placed in school buildings and neighborhoods where there might be high crime, with the objective, right, to tackle that, to give a space for kids to be engaged, be learning, so that they're not on the streets getting into trouble. Cool program, all free services. Loved what I did. Loved really working with children, youth, adults. So we provide an array of after-school services from children for children 6 and older. And in the evenings, we will do free GED and ESL for the adults, and provide them with childcare. So that we try to create like that one-stop shop to some degree, so that folks could find a safe haven and resources to kind of better their lives and their circumstances. So why I came to Reading is because when I had my babies, which are 18 months apart, I would go to work, leave them sleeping, come back home, find them sleeping, because I also have a Master of Science in Education degree. And so the school building where I worked as the program director, the principal hired me. So I would work in the morning as a part-time guidance counselor. And my focus was on college and career with high school students. So I would be in the school building from like 8 a.m. to like 9 p.m., sometimes 9:30 o'clock at night. And so that kind of took a toll on me. I only saw my babies on weekends. And in that time frame, I've been visiting Reading because my mom moved here when I graduated high school over there. So I did college in New York, and my sister did middle school, and she's a proud graduate of the Reading High School. So I knew at some point, my path would lead me back to the city of Reading, especially when I had my children, because I knew this would be the place that I would want to go home and raise my kids because of the better quality of life. And so I opened up a restaurant. That's how I got to downtown Reading with Mika, and I opened up Mi Casa because that created an opportunity for me to bring my kids to work. So totally different than what I did prior, but I saw an opportunity. I'm like, I've been praying for change, and I took a leap of faith, and I've had Mi Casa, gosh, for over 17 years now. I established it in 2007. And my objective was to be able to spend more time with my kids, make a little bit of money, because obviously the income couldn't compare to what I made in New York. But to me, spending time with my children was priceless. And being like a more active parent was more value to me. And so that's what I did. And now they're in college, and now here I am as a state representative.
Your journey brought you here.
Yeah, my journey brought me here. I never in a million years thought I'd be in politics, because the word politics made me cringe. I still struggle when people call me a politician. I'm like, oh, no, I'm not that. But, you know, it's part of, right, the responsibility. And I think it's because throughout the years, politics is like a dirty word, you're right? It's had a negative connotation. And we need to change that. I think this is why I ran for office too, because politics plays a crucial role in our pockets, in our life, in our quality of life. And I think that is what led me to get involved. And so when I opened up Mi Casa Su Casa in 2007, obviously I've always been connected to community. Anywhere I go, it's like I have to be vested in my community. And so I couldn't steer too far away from the community work that I did in New York City, which is why the restaurant is called Mi Casa Su Casa. It quickly became like a community hub, a space where it doesn't matter where you are in life or what you do for a living, whatever, whether you're homeless or not, veteran, all folks will come in and treat it with the utmost respect and, and treat it like if they're family. And so Mi Casa Su Casa became like a 411 and a space of resources. I did a lot of civic engagement, voter registration drive. I literally, after getting you your cup of coffee, I would ask you, hey, are you registered to vote? No? Oh, stay right here. Well, if you're eligible, of course. I'd give them a registration form, have them fill it out, and then I'll be like, I'll give it to the mailman. I have stamps. So that was like my investment into helping people be civically engaged and educated. Because I did some of that work also in New York City, like taught kids about the value of voting. And in fact, one of my last summers in New York City, I ran a summer youth camp, and we empowered and trained the youth on how to do voter registration, obviously with the staff, and they registered about 5,000 people that one summer in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. So impressive. I've always been connected to that type of work, and kind of like, obviously because of my background, teaching folks how to advocate for themselves, really, focus on community building, community uplifting, empowering, obviously empowering them with the tools that they need so that they can make better choices for themselves, their families, and their immediate communities. So Mi Casa Su Casa, it wasn't just about making money, right? It wasn't just a regular average business. It was like, I that mindset of that one-stop shop, or if I can offer you more than coffee, I took time to always listen to people that came in, because I'm always fascinated, with people and like learning, what they need. And I love serving and helping. That's always been part of me, that service. And if I can, pay forward what I've learned, what's helped me, then that's just how I've always lived my life. Obviously, when I started my business, my background was not in business, it was a nonprofit. And so I had to quickly adapt. But what I realized in the city of Reading, that the Latinos, or people of color, were the majority, right? However, we weren't represented or advocated for. And so as a business owner, I remember the time when we were the poorest. I say that because I felt it. I was on the brunt end of that, like on the receiving end, because I saw the changes. So I opened my business in 2007. The economy tanked. We went into a recession after 2008. And things just started just trickling and going just downhill really, really fast. And I went through that turmoil. So I saw the changes, the people being laid off, right? Because I'm in a downtown. And so every business, organization, firm, there was a lot of layoffs. How did I know that? Because I felt it in my customers, and I saw the decrease in consumption. But I tell you that I felt as poor as the city did. Like, it impacted me directly. I was depleted, depressed, down, drained. I'm like, oh my gosh. And then the negative perception, because I feel like the media did a lot to hurt the city of Reading, because everything that got always publicized was all the negativity, the crimes, shootings, things that happen everywhere. But in Reading, it was like emphasized. And I'm just like, wow, is this like intentional to just keep us oppressed? Like, what's up? So that was very challenging for me. And in that time frame also, I remember just all throughout the years that I've been in business, like local government coming to either for lunch, eat, blah, blah, blah. And I remember one year where our health permit fees, they jumped from $160 to $270. And I'm just like, what? No warning, no nothing. It was like, oh, here's the bill. And not to mention that quick story, but I remember going a year without a health permit because I never got the bill until I needed to do a catering job that required me to show them my health permit. So I was just like, and that's when I noticed, I was like, oh my gosh, I never got a health permit. So when I called, oh, there was a glitch. You were probably part of that batch of people who didn't get their permits, blah, 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 blah. So I was just like, okay. Then I had to go in person. And that's when I noticed the fee increase. And I was just like, wait. And I'm like, but what's this? You're talking about processing fee and this fee. And I'm like, but I'm the one here. And they couldn't even take my money then. I had to go back and forth to pick up the permit. Anyway, but to me, I was just like, wow, this is really like just overall bad management, bad communication. Reading isn't that big. Like you could, if the same way you come get a sandwich, you could probably give me information and ask me. So I noticed I'm like, that I was like, wow, government makes all these decisions and doesn't ask us, like without our input. So that's kind of like what made me get more involved and go to a lot of like council meetings. I participate in a lot of events, activities, drag my kids with me everywhere. And I remember the major red flag for me was I remember one of the mayors had invited me to be part of his transition team when he became mayor, and he asked me to participate in the committee that had to do with community and economic development. And I remember sitting there with some members of council, and I'm looking at this budget, and I'm looking, and I asked a question. And the response was, oh my gosh, for years, we haven't been able to figure this out, that. And I was like, whoa, you've been serving for how many years and you still don't have this answer? So I knew there were issues that led us to be the poorest, right? And so I was like, wow, this is major red flag. Like, we need to get more involved, and I'm going to run for office because this is unacceptable, because you're just making decisions that are hurting me and all of my neighbors, right? And because you don't know, we can't be penalized for what you don't know. It's your job to figure it out, right? Anyway, so my first run was in 2015. And to run for office, there's like a playbook, if you will. And you go to super voters, you knock on these doors, blah, blah, blah. Part of my district at the time for the city council, District 6, covered a lot of the South Side. And the South Side, historically speaking, was like, oh, the bad side, the worst side. Nobody really goes down there. And I was like, I'm from New York City. I'm going to the South Side. In any case, I chose to really knock on those doors and register people to vote and help them feel empowered, and why it's so important to vote, and why you need to be more involved and pick people that will advocate for you. And so while I lost that election, I was successful in the South. I actually won in the South because of my effort. So that made me feel good. It wasn't the desired outcome. I was short by maybe 75 votes to an 18-year incumbent who was, nonetheless, I'm sharing this with you because there's a point I want to make here about representation and what I now can label. I want to share an experience. That year, that primary, I lost, right? Then there was a shift in government, because that was that summer, spring, summer, where there was pay to play schemes and bribery. Bottom line, like the only Latino person serving on council, who happened to be the president of council, he was the first Latino president of council, got caught up in some type of bribery, etc. Anyway, there was a shift, so he had to resign. And so the incumbent who won the primary against me was on the ballot twice, for president and for District 6 seat. And I approached him and said, hey, why don't you give up this seat? So then I just won a primary. Like, now here's an opportunity for our community to get the best of both worlds, to get you as president and me as their District 6 council. I was like, okay, I see where this is going. You members of council, this is going to go into an appointment, so that the 6-7 members of councils are the ones who are going to decide the fate of District 6 in that seat. And sure enough, that's what happened. But what I did that fall, I did a writing campaign. I did it in both languages. I did videos. I was so adamant about educating people on how to do write-ins, right? So they could write my name in. I knew I was going to lose. I wanted to prove a point, right? Because I believed in, people don't vote because they feel disenfranchised. I did my job to register to get people to be part of the process. They voted. Unfortunately, I had lost the primary, but here's yet another opportunity to count those people that voted, count those votes, versus the few members of council that represent their respective districts, right? So, and I'm sorry if I'm extending the story.
Don't apologize.
Okay.
You go.
So anywho, it went to appointment as I knew. I followed through and I applied for the appointment. Did you think I got it or not? I didn't get it. They preferred to pick someone that looked like them, that they felt comfortable with. And I got, right. So so the votes that I obtained through write-ins during the primary didn't make a difference. Right. And I felt so that's how I understood the definition of systemic racism, right? Because I felt like, wow, I represent so many facets of our community. I'm educated. I'm a business owner. I'm a parent, bicultural, bilingual. I connect in so many different ways to our community, but yet, I was kind of like chopped off that list. And so that left a bitter, sweet taste in my mouth. I was like, you know what? I'm never running for office again. The hell with it. This, that, and the third. I'm going to focus on what I could do within my four walls of my business and just, build from that, educate, empower. And one thing just led to another. And then fast forward in 2019, the person that got selected to occupy the seat unfortunately passed away. And I remember like my husband pushing me. I was like, you should apply for that. I'm not running for office anymore. Like, I'm done. He's like, no, you should really. So literally the last day, like I met the deadline and I submitted my application. Because I'm like, oh, what's the difference? The majority of council members at the time is the same people that, rejected me the first time. So what's the difference? But, I got in. So I did get appointed. And then I ran and got elected in 2020, which to me was like the best victory in the world, to be elected by the people, right? And I quickly, it was my turn. And it's funny because I got to serve with a gentleman who beat me in the primaries. He was still president of council. And then the way council had appointed like the vice president was based on turn. So me being the newbie, the rookie, everybody had gotten a turn to be a vice president of council. And so then it was my turn. So I got an opportunity and I got to serve with the president of council at the time. And, it was a great experience then. I got to serve the people. I learned a great deal. And then unfortunately, when he passed, then, I managed to, the members of council decided to appoint me to be president. And that's how I became the first woman to serve as president of city council. And I don't think that's something that's really talked about or highlighted much, whatever. I don't do things for accolades. I feel like just life and circumstances have gotten me to be in these spaces because I've always had a desire to make a difference wherever I can. I'm like, God gave me these brains. My parents nurtured my brain so that I could do good. And, my dad would always say, if you're ever in a position where you can help others, you go for it, right? You help, especially those that they're less fortunate, that maybe don't know how to express their needs. You always try to be that voice and that person that's going to help folks.
I did notice. I saw that you were the first woman to serve as president of the Reading City Council. And like you said, it's not talked about a lot, and you don't do it for the accolades, but just as much as the community sees how we're scrutinized and our failures are emphasized, we need to celebrate our victories.
Right.
That's a milestone that everyone should celebrate.
Yeah, because it's about breaking down barriers important. And creating spaces for.
You're creating a path that wasn't there before you for others to follow in suit. So, just
Thank
as
you.
Our failures are,
I appreciate that. I feel like if I can do it, anybody can do it.
Yeah.
Right. But it's not something that in hindsight, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was the first woman to break down this, this wall. and be in this position, and now there's a woman president of council who got elected, right? So I was just like, oh yay, that's awesome, and I'm sure there'll be more women, and hopefully there'll be another woman mayor, because we only had one in the history of the city of Reading. Yeah, just one, and I don't even know how many years ago. So it's about time, right?
I agree.
But I have to say, at least we have the first Latino mayor, and now for the first time we have majority Latinos serving on city council,
which feels almost as if it should be obvious with such a majority of Hispanics.
Right, so you got about almost 70% of the population that are Latinos.
You would think that our representation has been, representative of the actual people.
I think this is the first time in the history of Reading that you have such diversity. That diversity is the majority on council, because you have members from like all sectors, right? Or that check like all the boxes, if you will. So that's pretty cool to see.
Yeah.
Because then they make better decisions, right? They can represent more people and more voices. Why your vote is so powerful, and how do you exercise your voice through your vote, and why then you determine who speaks for you, who makes decision for you, is because these are like important roles and important seats that we all hold, because we're voting and making decisions that impact everybody in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And so I think people need to understand like how serious that responsibility is, and not take it for granted. And I feel like maybe we need to rename politics, or maybe either redefine it. I mean, there's a clear definition, right? Mm-hmm. But I think that for so many years it's attained this negative connotation, so that's why people don't like talking about it. They think that it kind of like will cause like animosity or hostility or what have you, and it shouldn't be, because politics is daily life. We use politics in everything that we do. Politics plays a role in how we live, period. So to talk about it is because it's important, because we need to figure out ways that we can strive and thrive. So
to talk about it even is to create change.
Correct.
The more community-based you are, the more you realize all roads leads back to politics. Even on the lowest level, it starts here.
Absolutely.
And goes up. So.
That's something that needs to be instilled in schools, right? Because they have student government at the different grades, right? So they're involved in what's happening within their school buildings, mm-hmm. right?
So I want to touch on, going back a little bit on Mi Casa, Su Casa. You said you started the business here, and it's been successful. I have created a community around that business. But were there apprehensions? Like you said, you took a leap of faith, I imagine, on yourself and on your business, but also on Reading. Like you came here and you started that business.
Right. Remember, I didn't own a business prior, right? I knew, right, and I knew how to manage. I certain skill sets like organization, time management. Obviously, I understand budgets. I've learned to create budgets, how to interact with people, how to serve, right? So I had some skills, and then my dad was like the best cook ever. Loved how he cooked, and it kind of it quickly became a family business. Right. And we understood the objective. I created or took a leap of faith into this business more because I wanted to spend time with my children. Like I wanted them to be at close proximity to me. Right. I wanted them to be in my space. And in New York City didn't afford me that. And so, and then I needed it to be like a community hub, because that's innate for me. That's like my vocation to serve. Right. So I may serve you a cup of coffee, but like, we're also stimulating like your mind, your spirit, your soul. And that was the mentality, right? Like we're part of the community. And like I said, I got a lot of that, especially from my dad.
So I'm surprised he was the cook.
Yeah. Oh yeah. My dad was very integrated, and unfortunately I lost him 2 years ago.
I'm sorry.
But his food, everything was love. You
His
could tell,
and it lives within you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, anytime I feel like, oh, I'm gonna quit, because we all go through that. Oh, yeah. I could hear his voice. Querer es poder. Querer es poder. Like you can do it. So, yeah.
I love that.
And I have to say that also Mi Casa Su Casa has been a space where, oh my gosh, so many things have come out of there. Like I remember events that took place, like top of the block events. I remember, and if you spoke to Daniela Gusquiza, there was an organization that was fun. It was called the Tea Factory, and it was like a a shared workspace, if you will.
Yeah.
That so the brain like the brainstorming happened at Casa, the planning, the organizing. There was a time we had a group called the Collective. So we had people from like just different organizations and restaurants from even this side of the bridge that would come together to figure out how do we put Reading back on the map. People who cared about the success of the city of Reading.
Yeah.
And I come from that mindset. I look at strengths versus weaknesses. And for me, Reading has always been at potential, not at risk. Because, our resources, our assets are the people. And we have so many talented people in our communities. We just have to learn how to connect the dots. And I bet you if we started asset mapping, like if we took the map and we started like plugging in where businesses are, churches, community-based organizations, etc., you would see how rich and wealthy we truly are. We just need to learn how to work together.
Yeah.
And not in silos.
I agree. I remember you were talking about. I'm jumping so a little
Go
bit.
for it. No worries.
2007, you opened your business. In 2011 is when the New York Times reported Reading being the poorest city in the United States. But also in 2011, but before 2018, we also had the issue of the gerrymandering of our district.
Mm-hmm.
Now we didn't have any representation. So I guess how the numbers reflect we're not that city anymore. But from what you've seen, because you were there, you felt it firsthand, like you said, can you reflect on kind of that progress that we've made and how you've seen Reading change?
I mean, I think I'm part of that progress because here I sit as a state representative representing a percentage of the city of Reading, and it happened because of redistricting, of redoing the maps, and that typically happens every 10 years. So obviously the powers that be at the time saw how gerrymandering was hurting pockets of our communities throughout the Commonwealth, in particular the city of Reading. And I think that, yeah, I've seen the changes. Like I said, this is the most diverse, the more elected folks that we have that are conscientious, that connect, that understand the needs of the community because they're members of that community, right? They're culturally connected and understand how people receive information and how to reach them. So, and it's interesting that you asked me about gerrymandering because I remember if you Google me somewhere, I forget is it fair districting? I can't remember the organization, but I did a video on gerrymandering. Like I was interviewed about that topic in my place of business because yeah, obviously, that I think held us up a lot. No one was really paying attention to us or taking us into account. We were like neglected, like treated like not even a stepchild, worse than a stepchild. Like I felt like very abandoned as a community. And now, we're taking our power.
I love that. We're
taking our power. And that's kind of like one of my goals too. Even as I speak to young people, it's like every person in this community has power. They have to like recognize it, embrace it, and utilize it obviously for good and to kind of making sure that we're listening to all sectors and all pockets or parts of our community, that every voice is heard.
Yeah, valuing that and respecting that civic
absolutely.
duty like we're talking about. So you've already kind of told me how Reading has changed and the role the local government has had in that change.
And in fact, if I may add, right, because in talking about change, so the House of Representatives has 203 members. I have them listed up there. So amongst the 203 members, I want to emphasize there are 7 who identify as Latinos. And last term, we created a legislative Latino caucus for the first time, right? So when I talk about let's own our power, now this new term coming up, I'm going to be the chair of this legislative Latino caucus. So I'm super excited because, as a Latino community, and so I share this because, this is about owning our power and like letting our voices be heard and helping the Commonwealth understand the purchasing power that we also possess and how much we contribute to the economy and the quality of life of Pennsylvania, because there are well over 1 million Latinos in the Commonwealth of PA. And we often, and so no longer will the needs of our communities be neglected. We have a seat at the table, and we're going to be treated as equals with dignity and respect. And I represent everyone, but from my own personal experiences,
Yeah.
I can say that we weren't a priority. But now things have changed.
It was reflected in our numbers and
correct.
And our starts.
She's a great partner. I absolutely enjoy working with Senator Judy Schwank. And she's also about empowering others. So she's been like a great role model and a mentor for me. And I also want to say that there's a bill that Senator Schwank began working on maybe 6 years ago, and it was on and let me give you a little bit of background. So in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, in order for someone to become a certified teacher, the requirement is that you are a U.S. citizen. And if you're not, right, that you have to sign an affidavit or confirm that eventually you'll become one, right? Ever since the pandemic, we've noticed a lot of shortages in a lot of sectors, a lot of industries, especially amongst teachers. We have a major teacher shortage. And so when I joined the House of Representatives in my first year, I did a companion bill to change the language, right? So that if you are legally allowed to work in the United States, and obviously you have the credentials, educational credentials, that you be allowed to be certified as a teacher, because we have a need, right? That, to me, that was the most common sense, most cost-effective change we could possibly do. So, I've passed it in the House year one, and I have to say that the House Democrats have been in the majority since I came on board by one vote. I'm not saying that I'm that vote, because any one of us could be that one vote, but for years, for over a decade, the House was Republican majority. And so for the first time, 2 years ago, we became the majority when my first term, which I'm still finishing up. And so in year one, my House bill was 1067. I was able to get it passed through the House, but not through the Senate, because the Senate is majority Republican. Remember, Senator Schwank has been in the Senate for quite some time, and 6 years ago, every session she'd introduce this bill, and it'd get nowhere. So I at least got it past the House, but as a collective, we kept advocating, putting pressure, having folks email senators, call them, rally. And so while we didn't get the bill passed, we got it incorporated into the public school code this past summer with the budget. So that was a major one. And in fact, I will text you, if you give me your number, I'll send you an article on how in the Reading School District, we had one student who's now getting her certification. She's not a U.S. citizen. So that's like a win-win. So but it goes back to representation, right? And tackling, and the what gerrymandering means and why redistricting is important, because then you have fair representation. So that's kind of like a major win that I helped attain. I worked with Senator Schwank to get it through the finish line, and we didn't get it via a bill, and that's okay, but it got into the public school code. And that's like major, right? It's like game on. Not only are we opening, creating more opportunities for folks, for non-U.S. citizens to become teachers, but we're also creating opportunities for classrooms to be more diversified. So you have more teachers that look like you and I and others in the classroom, having that impact. Like that's how you help address teacher shortage. Like that's an easy fix. But it took 2 years. So, you know what I mean? Like a total of 6 years. And we passed it with this budget. It was, oh my gosh, I was jumping for joy. It was like the best feeling in the world, because, I took an oath, or I ran for this seat because I want to have an impact. I want to make a difference, right? I really want to help our community. Like I said, all members of the Commonwealth have opportunities to thrive.
So you touched this on a little bit, But what would you say to others who negatively perceive Reading, maybe based on only things that they've known, like that?
And don't believe the hype.
Like that article, right?
Right. Don't believe the hype. No, because I told you for years, it was always about the negativity. Right. And I have a high level of appreciation for the city of Reading because the city of Reading allowed me to own a commercial property, allowed me to be a business owner, allowed me an opportunity to raise my children while running my business, allowed me a better quality of life.
Which that in itself is a giant, like not just a business owner, a successful business owner, and look at the change that you created when you were given that opportunity.
It impacted my life like no other city. Now, obviously, I will always, I never forget my origins and my roots, right? Love New York City because New York City gave me that, like that hustle and grind, right? Because in New York City, in order for you to survive, you got to constantly be moving and, you know, what's the word I say? Rolling with the punches because, it can be chaotic, it's busy, and you just can't, it's a city that never sleeps. So it gave me, I guess, like that boot camp training for me to not give up here and keep pushing forward. But, oh my gosh, this is home for me. The city of Reading is my home. And it's, I've been able to do things here that I could have only have dreamed of in New York City. So I think that, we have to do a better job at telling our story and changing the narrative. Because Reading is resilient, and Reading, we can't lose the hope. Because it's created so many opportunities for a lot of members of our communities to own their homes.
Yeah.
And just have overall better quality of life.
I love that. So you talked a little bit about that bill that you were working on. Is there any other
Oh, absolutely. There's so I a few goals, and I have a very long list, but I'll highlight a few. Definitely reducing the age of voter registration. I believe that it should be 16. If our young people are allowed a driver's license at the age of 16, they should be able to be allowed to vote. Right?
Yeah.
Because they're mature enough I think it's more dangerous to get behind the wheel and drive than it is to actually learn about candidates and make a conscious decision and vote. Yeah. Right? So that's one. Also, helping get the CRIS appointed allocation, and that's community. CRIS stands for Community Revitalization Improvement Zone. And so the city submitted their application, and it's a tool, an economic tool to help developers, businesses. It's like a tax tool, a tax incentive. And I'm giving you homework to look it up so you can understand the definition and how it works. So I'm hoping that designation comes through for the city of Reading because it's time. It's time for us to really revitalize the city of Reading and put it on the map as it's, as it rightfully deserves, because the city of Reading is the 4th largest city in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So, when I talk about let's take our power, like it's time to get out of poverty. I also have tuition equity. And so what I've learned is that students who are undocumented, when they want to apply to college, obviously they don't get any benefits because they're undocumented, but in addition, they get charged out of state tuition, which doesn't make sense. And then I have like some other things. So I have on my list like summer youth employment programs, or maybe incentives for businesses to hire youth during the summers, because I believe that'll help reduce crime and help young people not be in the streets, getting into trouble, right? I'd rather have them learning a trade or a job or building their skill set, making a little bit of money, right? Yeah. Learning about financial literacy and things of the sort. What else? I have the
list goes on.
The list goes on and on. But those are some of the ones that, are like vivid in my mind. Ultimately, I do want to work on looking at like American history curriculum because it's very biased. And I would love for children to learn more about where they come from and the history of this country and also the history of their region so that they can be proudful Pennsylvanians.
So
And along those lines, when I think of also housing, affordable housing, maybe the pathway to home ownership, making that a reality. And also, I'm learning that there is more youth who are unhoused or who are homeless. So how do we use some of these dilapidated properties and get them, and renovate them, upgrade them, do what we need to do, and create these spaces for youth so that they can, have a roof over their head and then eventually transition them into owning their own. Do you know what I mean? Or having their own or being able to afford their own and things of the sort. So like my colleagues and I have passed legislation that even tackle like some of the vacancies in malls. Because when you go to some of the local malls, which are not necessarily in Reading, there aren't many stores. So it's like, how do we turn those into commercial and residential?
Yeah.
Right. So how do we get creative with some of these spaces?
Definitely. I mean, it starts
so that we can encourage, well, fill the gaps because the housing market is horrible right now. So, and then also, working with like landlords and maybe realtors and figuring out how do we also create some type of rent control. But when I also look at public housing, how does public housing also become more of a transitional space so that people don't feel like they have to stay stuck there? Not, there's nothing wrong with them because public housing, I mean, some of these apartments are so comfortable and they're in typically safe environments that people may not want to leave. But how do we get them to,
it's like affordable housing is here when you're there, and like sometimes it feels like even getting your own apartment can be so far away. It feels almost untangible when those prices especially are so.
Yeah. And then obviously also along those lines, like raising the minimum wage. How do we address also that whole price gouging, which relates to rent control to some extent? I mean, there's just so many. There's a lot. There's a lot that we've passed this last term in the House that obviously didn't make it to the Senate. So I know that we're going to be reintroducing a lot of legislation, a lot of bills. Unfortunately, it's like that's why government and changes. This is why things take so long in government. Why it's such an extended process, because there's so many steps for a bill to become law.
And not accepting no for so many times.
But also, I need to help people realize the power they possess, right? Because we work for the people. And so when people understand the process, they would realize how they can be more purposeful with their time and how they speak to their legislators to effectuate this change that we desperately need. Because I kid you not, we did increase the minimum wage in the House. We passed that bill, but it got stuck in the Senate. So we're listening to our community members and
so
we're working for people, but it's going to take people to help us, like I said before, get the legislation to the finish line so it's on the governor's desk and signed and enacted.
So there's, like you said, there's a lot of work basically to be done, which kind of ties in to one of my last questions here is what advice would you give to Reading residents and youth who want to become more involved and have their voices heard in legislation that they care about?
That they need to step up. And there's what is it? Yeah,
for youth, like for
someone who doesn't. So I'll give you an example.
Yes.
Okay, of another bill that I will be working on reintroducing in the legislation this term. So I was invited to Wilson West Middle School, and there was a health class. They did a PowerPoint presentation on artificial intelligence and the impact on the youth. And they pretty much not only identified the problem, they did their research in terms of what bills exist, and they critiqued the bills, and they asked that all AI generated content, whether it be videos, printed, that they have at least a 30% watermark. So it's visible so that it's not, it's a fake, right? And so I was so impressed by these students. I invited them over to the Capitol. They did a condensed version of their presentation to some of my colleagues. And long story short, I have a bill out, which I'm going to have to reintroduce in the new term. Simple. It's requiring that all generated AI material or content have a 30% watermark. And this was created by the youth. And so obviously, this is how I'm showing people how you can be part of the process. So if you have a recommendation, and this is to everyone, I don't care how young a child may be or how old a person may be, if they are realizing that they're coming across impediments or obstacles that are preventing them from, that are hurting them and preventing them from leading a healthy quality of life, speak to me, even whether they live in my district or not, because I'm always looking on addressing the needs of our community, but working with them to see it through and to carry it out. And that's how government only works when people participate in it.
So speaking up, voicing their concerns, and then working together towards a solution.
Absolutely. And I will add, so one of my goals for this new term also is to build relationships with our different colleges. We have about 4 in the area, so that I can create like internships, those type of opportunities, for credit or what have you. I'm also looking, and obviously we do have summer paid internships, but we're only allowed 40 hours. My first summer, I had 4 interns because they were all great. The ones that applied and we interviewed, I was like, okay, we're just gonna have to divide the 40 hours because I can't just pick one. And so, I want to be able to create more opportunities for young people. I also want to create opportunities for the high school students to have internships here. And my recommendation to the students of RAC is like they could literally take over the city 1 block at a time.
I love that.
They just have to hit the streets, walk the towns, do their own assessments, and integrate themselves fully into the day-to-day of what's happening in the city. Because like I said, the power is amongst the people.
I love that. My last question, really, you really already said it. If there's anything you would like the students of RAC to know.
And also, I want to add that the city of Reading, there is a youth council commission. So there's like mini city councils, and I'm sure there's some vacancies. Have them participate, have them apply so that they can represent the areas in which they reside. Another thing, I mentioned earlier when I opened up, my mom taught me knowledge is power, right? And so all city council meetings, because that's the local level, you can watch them on Facebook or you can watch them on the Reading PA website. So you can watch your elected people at work. The same is for the state. I encourage people to go on pa.gov or pastate.gov or Google PA General Assembly. Everything can be found on the internet, and subscribe to the General Assembly website, and you can and you will be emailed any legislation that we're working on, so that you could be in the know. You can also watch us. Every meeting, every committee meeting is recorded. When we're on the floor debating is recording. Everything is recorded, so people can, get their popcorn on and start. What I'm just kidding. People can. The information is accessible. They just have to click. And tune in.
Accessing the information in a form that they're used to doing.
And the thing is that people don't know.
I mean, I didn't know you can see it on Facebook.
Yes. Well, city council, you can. You can watch our stuff on YouTube.
Which is great. Like I said, forms to consume content that's important in ways that you already know how to do so. Where it's not like paperwork and stuff.
Right. Yeah. And again, subscribe. You can also subscribe to my website. I send out weekly newsletters, letting people know what I've done, what I'm doing, what's up and coming, and asking for feedback and trying to get people to subscribe. I'm trying to learn how people best receive information so that I can communicate with them that way.
So yeah, I agree. How you receive information is super important these days.
Yeah, because so when we do legislative door knocking. So when I've met some of the elderly folks who they prefer to get mail. Mm-hmm. They're not digitally connected. I remember this one lady, sweetheart. She was like, "Oh my gosh, I was just about to write to you." I'm so glad you came and visited. I love the newsletter. So, and obviously we have a budget.
Right.
And so I need to now, I'm going to base it by age or like, again, how do people prefer? Is it a robocall? Is it a text message? Is it an email? Do you need a piece, you need mail? And so that now in my new term, I can budget accordingly.
Yeah. Focus your initiatives where it's working, where it counts.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. I think we
because ultimately, if like I said before, knowledge is power. So if I can at least provide people with information and tools, then it's on them to
use them,
to act or use them. Right.
Yeah.
I have a great team. I try to, if a message to people, like in Spanish, hay un refrán que dice, dime con quién andas y te diré quién eres.
Oh my God, my mom used to say that
all the time.
In high school, she was like, I see little friends.
But that's applicable to even in your workspace.
Yeah.
Like, who do you surround yourself by? So, like, encourage young people to always surround themselves by people that they aspire to be like, people that may, that are gonna help, that can mentor them, that positive role models.
Yeah, I love that. I love that quote. I love it in Spanish.
And don't ever be afraid of the worst you're gonna get is a no. And so yeah, I love my team. They know how much how important it is for me to be amongst youth, like our children and our teenagers, right? Because they're the ones that are coming up. And if I can kind of leave a little piece of, like, if I can share a little bit of me with them and also and try to empower them, right? Because not every legislator is going to be like me. We're all different. We all carry out our functions differently. But I've always been passionate about working with children and youth. My background is in that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, I believe that's where our major investments always need to happen amongst the children and youth.
Yeah.
Because we're shaping them to be our future leaders.